ANC SG Fikile Mbalula described Pravin Gordhan as a veteran of the liberation struggle. Now, of course, he also joins us in studio today to have this conversation with us. Now, Mr. Mbalula, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the agenda. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us, and good morning.
Yeah. So first of all, let's perhaps maybe talk about the life and times of Minister Gordhan and just what role he played in the liberation of the country.
South Africa have lost a great patriot. The revolution have lost a revolutionary. The ANC have lost a veteran and a stalwart of our liberation struggle. Comrade PG was an architect of many things in our country, and local government. We only know him as a minister, but we don't know that chapter where he chaired the committee that dealt with the chapter in the constitution of local government alongside comrades like Vali Musa. And he played a pivotal role in the CODESA negotiations. He also played a very important role in terms of South African revenue services to be an institution respectable at the disposal of the state and the people of South Africa. In government, he became an activist, a champion of anti-graft and corruption. And when time called upon a person to take a stand, PG was one such. You knew where you stood with him. It was no fake, no plastic. If he took a stand, he'd take a stand. And he will be remembered for that. He was not money. He will not be loved by everybody. But we know that majority of patriots saw good in PG as a leader and a patriot of the South African body politic.
And also just looking back at all the roles that he held, you know, there were times where he actually went out of favor. But like you said, that, you know, he was a firm person, which is one thing that keeps coming up right now from everyone that's actually sharing their reflections, to say that he was quite steadfast. At times, he was also firm. Talk to us about those leadership qualities, because I'm sure even in your space, there are times where you don't necessarily agree with someone. But how did you find common ground with the figure like PG?
Well, PG was not a pushover. One thing for sure, I worked with him as a colleague in cabinet. I also worked with him now as the Secretary General of the ANC, and I worked with him as a party member in the National Executive Committee of the ANC. He was an intellectual. He was a person of integrity. He was not swayed by what was said around him. He believed in his own ideas and persuading others. And he was astute in that sense, in terms of his intellectualism to engage with others, and very firm in his beliefs. And you could see that in his interventions in different portfolios that he held in government, but equally also in the liberation movement. He understood the theory of the revolution very well. He was armed with tools of analysis in terms of this revolution we are pursuing, and very clear at all times about where he stands, guided by those tools, and at the same time by organically the knowledge of struggle and the experience he have accumulated over the years.
And actually, with what you're saying now, I'm taking it back to a conversation I think I was listening to this morning with Ambassador Potgieter. She actually said that Pravin Gordhan served till his very last days because he would still be present at the NEC meetings as well. Just how dedicated was he to the cause?
He was dedicated. He worked very hard. At the time of his retirement, and then he said, SG, I'm not coming back, please. I'm now going for retirement. At that time, he was visited by ill health and at the same time death. So it's a pity that happened. For a man who has worked for his entire life for South Africans and for our struggle. And so he was dedicated beyond measure. And I think he was there all the time. And even though you will see sometime that, he was reaching his days of retirement, the heart still wanted him to be in the forefront. So PG, you can't accuse him of not being available and hardworking. And he was a hardworking person, and which are the attributes and traits that are needed for people who are in service of the people.
And looking at the liberation struggle that you talk about right now, looking at the liberation movement that you also serve right now, let's look at the values that he also stood for. And I ask this because I'm going to maybe touch on the role that he played in his testimony into state capture back in 2020. He kept going on talking about the importance of having a government that looks out for the people, a government that is for the people. So is this a liberation movement that continues to now uphold those values just moving forward, even with him having passed away now?
PG is largely hated by those who hate him and who have defined themselves in inimical terms as people who don't like him, simply because of the fact that he took a stand against corruption in our country and the running down of state institutions, not just public enterprises, but institutions all around. And then he took a stand and he fought. And many South Africans were on his side when it was not fashionable. He was not a coward. And we're not saying it in vain, because he's no more. In deeds, and when he was still alive, he used the common word, connect the dots. He did. And then he was proven right. Today, there was a commission in our country that came to a conclusion overwhelmingly after gathering evidence that indeed there was state capture. And PG led from the front in that regard. And not all of us will be counted in history. When time came to take a stand individually and as a collective, we did so. PG was one such in our country. And for that, he won friends. And for that, he gained enemies. And that is what you will see even in his tributes, including those who wished him dead, even when the man was no longer playing an active role in politics. But even then, they still wished him dead. And that's it. And even doing unethical things that are not done when somebody has passed on, like celebrating death. How do you celebrate a hero like Pravin Gordhan? And I dare say he was a hero of our people, because heroes are defined by their deeds. And when the moment came and defined them, had to take a stand, they take a stand, and he did.
And here's the thing, I think I'm also taken aback to one lecture that he gave some few years ago where he spoke about a leadership deficit. He said that the country is seeing a leadership deficit. Would you agree with that? And if you do, what will it take to perhaps fix it, thinking of some of the values that he stood for?
When it is said leadership has got, we're faced with leadership deficit, you don't argue with that. As a practitioner in the moment, you look at that statement and you actually analyze why he arrived at that particular decision. PG had a critical mind and was not short of criticizing and being independent. But most of the time, he was constructive. He will not be somebody who threw concepts, verbose, insurrectionary phrase-mongering and terminologies. He will go deeper and deeper. And there are times even in the UDF, as the youth, we were very much critical of him and some of the comrades. But he led the intellectual discussions and debates in our organization. And that found expression. When we met with the Boers around the table, they made some of these freedom fighters who were so astute intellectually and clearer. But these people have never studied some of the big, things that they would have studied, but had an overall knowledge of what needs to happen for the country. And PG was at the helm of that. So he was gifted in many ways. He was gifted, and he was gifted intellectually. And he was very much there all the time in terms of thinking in the liberation movement.
Just how will he be remembered? Let's talk about the legacy he leaves behind.
He will be remembered as a person when time came to take a stand against wrong, he did. He will be remembered as somebody who was an organic intellectual in revolutionary terms, an intellectual. He will be remembered as a leader and as a patriot, somebody who loved his people and South Africa. Under apartheid, he was there. He took a stand. He suffered. He was harassed, like many, and at the hands of the brutality of the South African police. Under democracy, he led and took part within a collective to shape the democratic future of South Africa. Under the new dispensation, he took leadership, both as a public servant of the people from an administrative point of view, and led for all to see the fruits of what he did whenever he was assigned a task. SARS is there for us to see. PG, that speaks for you. When it came to times to fight, when we veered off as a liberation movement in terms of our task of upholding good ethical standards as a liberation movement, he took a stand and said, I'm not party to that. And he fought within the ANC-led liberation movement, and to say, not in my name. State capture must be fought and must be defeated. He did. And then when it was time to provide leadership in the task he was assigned at the macro political level of the state, and not at the status of government as a minister, he did well in terms of shaping local government and what needs to be done, in terms of the poor performance of many of our municipalities that led to the DDM later on. And then, he perfected, and to a certain extent, where he was deployed in public enterprise, in the work that he was doing, complicated, but also by state capture and all of that, time was not on his side, but he did make his contribution. Today, we are on our way of shaping policy in relation to South Africa's logistics in terms of Transnet, and then also in terms of the rail policy, moving goods from road to rail to expedite delivery and opening up the possibility of the logistics corridors to ensure that there is faster growth in terms of the economy. And that work he pioneered. And I was moved by Mteto, the chair of ESCOM, who said that PG gave me a chance as a minister, of course, to be chair of ESCOM, and also did participate in taking the name of Dan Marogana as the CEO to cabinet and working with others in cabinet to move faster in terms of addressing load shedding. And today we are reaping the fruits of what he has taken part in. Of course, there will be those who have dissent, and they are allowed. And so overall, he will be remembered as a patriot.
And just on that note, as you continue to speak about the legacy he leaves behind and how he will be remembered, we cannot quieten the noise as well, as you've rightfully spoke about, that there are those with dissenting views as well. There are people who say that he was essentially advancing the mandate or the agenda of the capitalist, and also sold state-owned entities to privates, and subsequently some of them are now in tatters. What would your reaction be to that?
It is those who are against renewal. We will say such. The empirical evidence will show otherwise. PG didn't sell public enterprises. In his endeavor to work around SAA, which was run down by state capturers, SAA was well-run state entity before PG was there. We had successive CEOs who ran down that entity and different chairpersons. And the longest serving one, may her soul rest in peace, to Dumieni. You know what happened. You know what happened. No privatization, but at the end of the day, to try and save SAA, workers were retrenched, thrown out. You may criticize and say the model employed by PG with a full endorsement of the ANC and the alliance, by the way. He did not do those things without consultation and government. You may criticize the operational effects of that particular strategy to save SAA, to save jobs, which is what it did. You can't blame it on PG that Transnet was run down. You had locomotives that were sold in China. I remember when I was Minister of Transport, he spent quite a good time with Porsche in China talking about the locomotives. The same as I spend a lot of time in Spain trying to save the long trains so that the Shosholoza Mail can come back into action. Barbara Creasy will continue with that. But these are the things that were there. These are the things that were there. It is quick to forget that PG never started the demise of the state entities. He came in to save. And saving a disaster doesn't take a week. It takes time. But South Africa will reap the fruits of what Pravin Gordhan have started. And that time and the moment is now. And it will reap the fruits as we go forward. Like all people, we will forget that who saved the moment. And when history judge Pravin Gordhan will remember that this is the man, when it was not fashionable and it was not easy, he stood. And today, our kids and our great-grandchildren are reaping the fruits. No amount of populism will make us forget. It will be temporary if it come in, but it is not permanent. The truth will prevail.
All right, Secretary General, thank you so much for your time on the agenda today. That is, of course, Secretary General of the African National Congress, Fikile Mbalula, joining us right here on the program.